Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our July training for agents. We're so happy to have everybody here joining us today, and we're going to get started right on time because we have so much information to cover. So you might have seen our ads online. We are talking today about Inspection 101 and the things we can look out for as realtors when we're going through a house with client. Building this knowledge makes us better realtors and better stewards for our clients on their home ownership journey. So today I have with me the one and only Roger Linton of Trillium Inspections, and we have used Trillium for years and years and years on the team. Roger is incredible. He keeps us out of lawsuits, and not only did Roger inspect my own personal house, when my mom was buying, there was only one person I trusted to make sure that she was making a good investment and was living in a home where she knew exactly what was going on. So Roger, can you introduce yourself to everybody?
Thank you very much, Sarah. So just let everybody know, I've been doing home inspections now for 27 years, and I was a builder before that. So I can go through and explain a lot of stuff to customers. I mean, there's one thing finding this stuff, it's a lot of stuff is visible to me, but explaining on how to do repairs, how your contractor should be doing repairs, and talking about you understanding exactly what needs to be done to this house to make it in much better shape. So I just like to go through and explain a lot of stuff. I want to explain to agents how easy it is to pick up some of the stuff that's outside of a house and around a house that should be notable, and you could point out to your customers on if they want to make an offer on this one or not. And so there's quite a bit of stuff I want to show you, just starting off right from the beginning, okay?
Absolutely. And also normalizing things. Just because we're finding challenges doesn't mean that the entire house is falling down, right? There's a lot of fixes that can be done or things that can happen after the fact that can still make it a great home, even if there's some hiccups on those initial showings. Yeah. Okay, so what's the first thing? I'm pulling into the driveway of a house with my clients. What's one of the first things that I should be paying attention to?
So first thing, when you're back on the road and pulling into the driveway, you've got a clear view of most of the shingles. So take a really good look at your shingles. You can usually tell how old they are if they're starting to curl. In this condition, they're starting to curl, and you know they're going to get worse. So it's something you're going to be prepared to put money into right away. Putting shingles is a standard thing. Most of the shingles used to be 20-year shingles. Now most of the new ones are actually 35-year shingles, which are a lot better. Mm-hmm. But you know, as soon as you see a house, you know, okay, should I be upgrading and time to put new shingles in? Be prepared for that. It's something maintenance-wise has to be done every 20 years. There's stuff on houses that needs to be done every 20 years, such as your furnace, your air conditioning, shingles, pretty common stuff. Shingles are now 35 years, which is a good thing because you're getting longer, and you'll see them. They're a more decorative shingle. They're a lot thicker. There's quite a few things you'll notice of them, but I mean, you can pull in the driveway and take a look at your shingles right away.
And just to clarify, so if you had to replace shingles, that doesn't always mean you're replacing the trusses and the entire roof, right? There's different levels of, you know, roof challenges that can happen.
Yeah, and so lots of times when you look inside, even a shingler, when he peels them off, he looks at what the wood underneath is like. If the plywood's got some wood rot in or something like that, he'll change certain boards out. Just different things like that they'll look at. When I do my inspections, I'll look in the attic again and look to see if there is issues going on with with some of the roof boards. Very easily to take care of. Another thing, when you're pulling in, you can see on this house, if you look at some of the eave troughs, you can see some of the dings in them and stuff like that. When we look around the side of this house too, if you see eave troughs that have a black stain on them, it tells you that the water's been overflowing. So the downspouts are not, the water's not going down the downspouts because the eave troughs are full of leaves and stuff. And so you'll notice all the black staining going on in a lot of the eave troughs to tell you that they're overflowing. And there's actually a trough in the ground where it's been overflowing and leaving a trough in the ground too.
Okay.
Which you can pick up. So you're throwing water up against the foundation wall instead of your eave troughs catching the water, taking them into a downspout, and the downspout probably extending away from the house.
And that could be as simple as you just have to, you know, put in some elbow grease. The client has to get up on the roof and maybe clear out the eave troughs.
Cleaning, yeah.
And of course, looking to make sure there are eave troughs. I've certainly showed houses where there's none at all.
Yeah. And when you look at those houses without eave troughs, there's definitely a trench line where everything comes off that roof, falls in a trench line. It's so close to the foundation wall that you're throwing water against the foundation. So you're asking to get water into a basement.
Okay, so we're looking for, you know, the shingles curling, you're looking for staining on the eaves troughs, any issues with that? Obviously, no eaves troughs, and then anything on the ground that indicates that, you know, water has been overflowing there over time.
Yeah.
Which could lead to, you know, water in the house, which is nothing that anybody wants, right?
No, that's the main thing. You want to correct your water from getting into a house, right? And to tell you the truth, it's so easy to fix water from coming into a house. Improper grading, improper downspouts, overflowing eave troughs, things like that will throw water at a basement. And once it gets water in a basement, I mean, you're damaging all kinds of stuff in a basement, right?
Which then, you know, more and more money when once the water gets inside. It's easier to prevent it.
Yeah.
Prevention is ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure,
Yeah,
right?
it is. It's so easy. I mean, a lot of things we look at too is not just you know, what's wrong with the house, but what's gonna happen to a house. And I mean, just by this downspouts not getting away, maybe the water's not getting in there yet, but come back in 10 years' time, that downspouts not taken care of. A small thing like a downspout's not taken care of, water's gonna end up getting into the basement, and then you're gonna have an issue. So I try to tell people what's gonna happen in your house in 10 years' time. These little things, take care of them now before they get worse. That's all.
Well, and keep the value of your home up, right?
Yep.
If you're investing, homes are a big investment. Sometimes for most of us, the biggest investment we're making, and you want to make sure it's lasting, right? You're not damaging your investment and losing money for something that's really easy to prevent.
Yep. Yeah, just maintenance is it's a big thing on a house. People need to understand. I love taking people with me and just showing them maintenance wise, you know, small things you gotta take care of. Just how to take care of them and ask me questions because I can show you a lot of stuff and just maintenance wise and what keeps a house in good shape.
Absolutely. Well, and guys, Roger loves questions. I ask probably more questions than anyone when we're out on inspections together. And you always, you know, take the time to explain what's going on so we can understand.
Yeah.
Okay, so roof is number one. What else are we looking for? You pull into the driveway of a house. What else is kind of really critical as a big ticket item?
So you always look at the front door first.
Really?
One of the front door things, I mean, you come to these set of stairs, and I don't know if we got a good picture of it right now. But you're stepping down into your lower area here for one thing. So it's a cooling pocket area, so this is where water is going to sit into us.
Okay.
And then your steps the water gets underneath all of the stonework under here, and will drop it. So then when you come to your front door, the step just starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So over the years, all this starts to settle. And then all of a sudden your first step is 7 inches, your next step is like an 8-inch or 10-inch step. That becomes a tripping hazard. And most people are, you know, if you're not comfortable doing the steps, you realize, okay, something's happening with this. It's not a comfortable step. What's going on? Settling. How hard is it to take care of? Pretty easy, actually, because just lifting everything out, have a couple friends over, put some soil or put some sand and gravel down, fill it back up, and let everything flow out of here.
Okay, so again, another easy fix that when you're coming up, are there any grading issues by the front door that could lead to that settling and a drop there? And again, I know uneven stairs are definitely a tripping hazard, especially if it's a new house and you're not used to it, right?
And I've had a lot of agents come back to me and go, Roger, you're always talking about tripping hazards. It's a big thing. But I've had a few agents who have stumbled and fallen down and hurt themselves and said, look, I am so glad I ever listened to you, Roger, because I know now enough to watch every time I walk on stairs.
Yes.
So many stairs are built with improper risers, where one riser is 7 inches, the next one's 8 inches. That's a tripping hazard for a lot of people.
Yes.
Insurance companies don't like to see that either. But they're usually really easy to fix.
Right.
And that's the main thing to understand. You know, it's just part of maintenance. Make sure all your steps are even. Make sure everything's set up so the insurance is good now because somebody tripped themselves.
Well, exactly. It's not just you tripping. You might get used to the house and, you know, the uneven stairs. You bring over like mom or grandma for a visit and they trip. You're going to feel rather bad that you didn't do an easy fix and fix those stairs, right? Yeah. Okay. Now, what about windows? I know that's when we think of big ticket, we think of roofs and we think of windows. What kinds of things are we looking out for?
As we pull up to a house, you're running the camera here?
Yeah. So we might have
pull up to the house, we can see the front window on this one. You'll see the seals are starting to underneath there. Yeah. Okay. They'll start to claws out. You'll start to see clouds. Everybody wants to know which seals are going and if it's starting to go on a house. And it's mainly just keeping up with the movements of it. You know, so a cloudy window on the front living room is something you want to do maintenance on.
Sorry, Roger, we gotta talk over here into the mic here. I'm gonna move this over a little further. No worries at all. Sorry about that. So we were looking more at the seals here, right? No. So it's all good. So tell me about the seals and what we're looking out for here.
So when a thermal seal is actually between the two panes of glass.
Okay.
So they'll cloud up, when the windows cloud up if a thermal seal goes on a house. And you know, when we get into houses 20 years and older, we know that there's a good chance the window seal's starting to go on them. Depends on the quality of the window and stuff like that. Just maintenance wise, you can hire contractors in, they'll do drill in the top corner and drill in the bottom corner and do a flushing system and try to seal the window back up. Or you can take your choice and spend the big money and buy a new windows, okay?
Okay, so it doesn't always have to be a brand new window. Like
Nope.
you could do something that's, because I'm looking at these beautiful windows here and the size of them, and
yeah,
bigger the window, the bigger the cost for replacing,
Yeah.
right?
True. And also, things maintenance wise you want to do on a house, you can see the caulking has started to separate on these windows.
Okay.
Caulking is really important because it keeps the draft from blowing in and around the windows. It keeps the water out. Water is, like again, we talked about the eave troughs, the downspouts. Where does water go on a house? We really want to know. We don't want it coming inside, so the caulking around a window is very important to keep up with it, okay? Now, these houses have the soldier bricks, so we really look at the soldier bricks around the window. And we look at when they have the mortar concrete sills, we look at how the mortar is in it and what kind of conditions it is, because if water gets into it and gets down into that brickwork, it'll start cracking the brick because we get frost up here.
So then everything expands. Okay.
Frost gets into it, expands, it cracks the mortar out of the house. Then you start getting loose bricks. Just maintenance wise, it's a simple little fix. Keep up with the caulking.
Okay. And caulking isn't super expensive. Again, when you're looking at the cost of, you know, re-bricking the front of a house or fully replacing the windows.
And when you're talking about caulking, I mean, caulking is fairly easy for people to do. You need a glass of water and a wet finger, and you can slide around and make it nice and smooth. Professional guys really know what they're doing. But one thing I want to advise you, when you're going to your hardware stores and buying your caulking, don't buy the cheap stuff because you'll be doing it again next year.
So spending that little extra, especially if you're doing it yourself and saving on those labor costs, it's, you know, not getting the cheapest one at the shelf, or guys, don't go to Dollarama to get the caulking for your windows.
Because you'll be doing it again next year if you do.
Absolutely.
You want caulking that'll last. Good caulking, you can walk up to it in the middle of winter time is minus 10 degrees outside, and you can push on it, it'll still flex.
Okay.
It's nice to see good caulking on houses.
So that's the important part, is that it's flexing, right? So when we're getting those temperature swings, it's not, you know, rock hard, which then could allow water to get in behind it.
As soon as it gets rock hard, it's going to crack, it's going to separate, it's going to open up and allow water back into it. So we try to prevent that.
Absolutely. And just to note, guys, if your windows are on a second story, you're on a really tall ladder, I always advise bringing in the pros. Working at heights is no joke, so you want to make sure you're doing it safely. Okay, so it's not always, like you said, a full replace. So somebody could be drilling in the corners if it's a case of the window you're getting the thermal seals going. You can replace the caulking yourself, or bring in somebody else, or then again, you can bring someone in for a window replace.
Yeah.
Now, do you have to do the whole house at once if you're doing windows?
No. Lots of times you'll find the south windows go first.
Okay.
Just because they get the sunshine on them more and the seals start to leak a little quicker on them. But yeah, the ones that get the south side and then the west side are usually the first to go.
Okay.
We find lots of times the north windows, I've seen them 35, 40 years old.
Really?
No problems with them. Yeah. So it all depends. You know, windows can last. It depends on the quality of window too. That's
right
to begin with. Okay. But yeah, just some little maintenance, and I can talk to you all about the maintenance and how to take care of it, and just regular taking care of it. But it's easy for people to see. You know, if you got caulking issues, you know you want to get them recon.
Exactly, and that could indicate, again, there might be, you're watching inside. Is there any issues of water issues? Is there anything on the bricks that looks like the brick is cracking? If you're seeing that caulking starting to crumble or that deterioration, even without us being inspectors.
Right.
Okay.
Everybody can see if the window caulking is starting to separate. Or
absolutely.
Not. Just a simple thing. But it's maintenance. It needs to be done on a house on a regular basis. I mean, there's professional guys around that do really good jobs. Will do the top quality caulking for you too. People say, oh, they're pretty pricey. Well, you know what? They're doing the best caulking for you. They're not going to be putting the cheap tube of caulking into it. They're doing a professional job.
Absolutely. And professional, they would generally last longer. Even if I'm getting the best at the hardware store, if I'm hiring a pro, their caulking is going to last longer than mine will, right?
Yeah, their caulking hasn't been sitting on a shelf for 5 years before they put it in too, right?
Well, and they know it properly. They didn't just learn off a YouTube video the best way to do caulking, right?
The best ones. It's good.
Okay, so those are kind of the main things that we're looking at the house. We're looking at roofs, front doors, and the windows.
Yeah.
Right. And also you mentioned you're looking at the grading. We're looking for anything, any grooves that indicate there's water overflowing or that water is pooling against the house.
Right.
Okay.
Any pooling against the house means you're putting water up against the basement wall.
Right.
When you're putting water against the basement wall, it's trying to find its way into that hole. If there's a pinhole anywhere, that water is going to find its way.
Well, in path of least resistance, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we try to make sure that the grading is set up. So even when a subdivision is put together, part of the building planners, they make sure that the grading is actually sloped off of every house.
Okay.
There's a pattern. One of the big things we find, people put fences in between you and your neighbor.
Okay.
And when they do that, they get the guy who drills the holes, puts his posts in. What do I do with this dirt? Oh, I'll just level it off in here. Well, now you've just kind of blocked all that water flow.
Okay.
Because that has raised up the soil where the water is actually supposed to run.
So especially if it's an older subdivision, you might see more changes in the grading because, you know, everybody's been putting up fences or putting in gardens or putting in landscaping that, you know, they did quietly, maybe with or without talking to their township about what's okay.
That's right. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in people's backyards, like even putting a little shed in or putting a pool in. Have you blocked the flow from your neighbor's yard coming down through? If that grading is supposed to flow from that neighbor down through to this neighbor, down to that neighbor, that water is supposed to flow through there. Drop a pool in the backyard, that's going to block up all the water.
Makes a lot of difference, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So there's a lot of things. I mean, it's a lot of stuff to look at, but you can easily see when you're looking at a house, is the water flowing away from this house? Is it blocking your neighbor's house? What is it actually doing? You hate to have your neighbor come knock on the door and say, look, your pool, the previous owner, you just bought it. Now it's your problem.
Yes.
You want to see this water flow through your pool somehow here. So it's just things you really want to look at and make sure you're not causing damage to neighbors' properties too. Okay.
Absolutely. Well, and you certainly don't want to make neighbors angry. These are the people that are living next to you in the community, and you want to make sure you have those, you know, amicable relationships and you haven't flooded their basement because you decided to put in a pool.
That's right.
Okay.
You know, another thing is in between houses, lots of times we see people talk with their neighbors and go, well, let's put patio stones in here and make it nice and level because I'm sick of cutting that lawn on the angle. And I'm sick of cutting mine on the angle. It's like, let's make it level. Well, then where does the water go?
Yes.
Yes, stuff like that we have to really look at. Okay.
Well, and things you don't always think about, right?
Yeah.
Yes, the day to day, I like it to be level. And is that worth me having a flood in my basement?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay, so we're going to pause here briefly, guys. If you have any questions, please throw it in the chat box here. We have 2 more locations we're going to cover in this property here and some other things that we can look at. So throw any questions in the chat box. If not, we're going to take a quick little break here and then we will be right back. Amazing. Thank you so much, guys. So we are in the backyard now, but before we get started, you'll notice our other camera is focusing on the bottom of the east loft. So what do we want to notice there where we have the other camera looking, Roger?
So you can see the darkness, the dirt that's coming on the bottom of that eave trough. That tells me that there's leaves in that eave trough and it's overflowing. Okay.
Okay.
So that's just the water's overflowing out of that eave trough. It's showing all the water over the eave trough and it's just bringing a lot of dirt with it. Chances are we're going to have water not going down the downspout, but it's coming down that eave trough and it's coming up against the side of the house then because it's not properly flowing away. Like we want to catch it in the eave troughs, bring it down the downspout, and then properly flow it away from the house.
Absolutely. Okay, so even though when I was walking down the side, guys, we didn't notice anything on the ground. I didn't see anything on the ground showing that. But when we looked up, that's where we're seeing all that discoloration. Okay.
And if you look at the ground over there, what you really see is you'll see an awful lot of low areas. So when we're at the front of the house, before we start walking around the house, everything is sloping back in towards this house.
Okay.
So in other words, there's been a ton of water up against this wall and it's bringing the water up against the red wall there.
Okay, so because of those low spots, then when the water overflows the eave trough, then it's just hanging out there right against the house where we don't want it to be.
No, and water just keeps dropping things.
Yes.
So even Right, I can go through so much, guys. But even that, when I get water up against the garage wall, first thing I want to check now is the garage floor, because the garage floors drop. Because they get
Okay.
undermined where the water, the dirt underneath that concrete floor has settled. And now all of a sudden you've got an air pocket in there. And sometimes I've seen the air pockets 3 or 4 inches air pocket, and the whole garage floor will drop 3 or 4 inches.
Really? So is that something, like, I was only thinking water against the foundation, right? That's not against where the basement is, it's not a problem. But even though it's against the garage, this is still a problem.
Yeah.
So can we tell if there's the air pocket underneath there?
Sometimes when you walk in a garage, you'll see where the concrete was on the garage wall and that it's dropped 2 or 3 inches.
Okay.
Just think you can see. I mean, me, when I do it, I walk in with a stick and I can tap on the floor. And if you tap in the middle of a garage floor, it's solid because it's an area that hasn't been dug out. But when you walk over to a wall, you'll hear the hollowness underneath the garage floor sometimes.
Okay.
And if it shows signs of it has dropped, then you know there's an issue going on. Repouring a garage floor is pretty expensive. You got to break them apart with a jackhammer and redo them.
Right.
Depends how hollow they are underneath them, right?
Well, and if you're bringing in your really fancy cars, you got Mustangs, you got Mercedes you're keeping in the garage, you certainly don't want it dropping while your beautiful cars are on top of it, right?
And believe me, you see a lot of them.
Really?
Quite a few floors do drop, but usually you can see outside if there's going to be an issue with it or not.
Okay, so again, it's not just the foundation and water going inside. Even if it's against that garage and there's nothing underneath, that can have a big impact, right?
It can cause a lot of problems to a garage floor. So yeah, there's, you worry about the water in the basement, but you should worry about the water getting underneath the garage floor also.
Well, and at that point, there wouldn't be the cheap fix. So once the water has gotten in, there is that pocket, it's dropped the floor, you have to report the floor.
Now the damage is done.
Okay, which I think we all just had a shock there, guys. The cost of garages is no joke, especially now.
Yeah.
Okay, so grading, important. Now, when we're looking in the backyard, we're also looking at decks. And I know decks are one of your hot button issues when we're out on inspections, because no matter the quality of the property, doesn't always mean that the rear decks were done properly.
I have to tell you, even me and my buddies, when I was younger, sure, I knew how to swing a hammer. Anybody can put a deck together.
Yeah.
And I did it myself. But it's really important to know you got proper footings under a deck, you got a proper beam under a deck. Did your footings go deep enough or not? When I looked at this deck, one of the first things I did catch is one corner's higher than the other.
Okay.
Which tells me those footings didn't go down deep enough, because it is sitting on a footing. And I believe that it wasn't down deep enough. Do they have to be at least 3 feet under the ground, or the frost can get underneath them and lift them up? So with a footing being raised like that, that means it's going to take a lot of work to get down there, repair a footing, and put this deck back on to support somehow, okay?
So you'd have to move the whole deck to fix the footing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you can take beside them and do different things, but there's a lot of work to it, okay?
Okay, so it's not just, so we want to make sure that there are footings, right? I know I have seen decks that are just sitting right on the grass.
And everybody sells the deck blocks where they can sit there, but be prepared, because in the wintertime, your whole deck's gonna rise 2 inches anyway.
Really?
With the frost, it'll lift it up 2 inches, and then it'll set it back down the spring. Hopefully it sets it back down level again. And it's a pretty iffy situation, but that's a big sales feature. No, let's just do the deck blocks. They sell them for a reason, right?
Right.
They're good for everything south of Tennessee, as far as I'm concerned.
but not up here where we get our Canadian
Not
winters.
with the frost up here, no.
Okay, and again, like you said, it could change it so it's not level, or over the years it goes up and then it goes down and it goes up and it goes down.
Yeah.
What happens over the course of 2, 3, 4, 5 winters?
And then again, another thing we like to look at too is the beams. We want to make sure, so many decks, I see them, they got a fascia board. The joists are coming into a fascia board and they're all being held on a fascia board. Well, a fascia board isn't meant to hold the strength. The fascia board's only there to enclose the ends, okay? You've got a deck support post on one end of it and deck support post on the other end of it. Well, a 2x8 isn't meant to hold the whole support of a deck. It should have a beam underneath it, so all the floor joists sit on top of a beam system, and then your deck is solid. You can have 8 or 10 friends over and be prepared. They're not going to fall through it. I hate to see it, but there's a ton of decks out there that they actually are putting all the weight on a header board, and issues happen. because those decks will crash. You get enough weight on.
Absolutely.
You know, they're not meant to hold up all the way. So there's, and I'm sorry, I get into new houses that have the same things. Somebody's been there for a year and they put their deck on. Nice, beautiful deck, but boy, not supported properly.
So it doesn't just have to do with like how the deck looks. Like the deck looks great, it looks pretty, but it's the structure that's most important to make sure that, you know, you're not hurting yourself or you have that longevity. You're not having to redo the deck.
Right. Yeah. So it's good to look underneath it. Just take a quick look underneath, see if there's a beam system.
Okay.
See what that beam's sitting on. Hopefully it's sitting on concrete piers that go into the ground.
Okay.
You know, other than that, if it's got 6x6 posts going down on the ground, that's okay too, as long as they put them deep enough. And me, myself, I can't tell how deep they are, but I see the after facts where the frost gets on and then all of a sudden it starts moving. And I can report to customers that you have an issue with the support being under there. It's too bad we found it after, but it's something that I can't tell you how deep those footings go into the ground. Okay.
But we know it's not deep enough if we're seeing that challenges with leveling or unevenness on the surface of the deck.
So we look for all that stuff, but at least anybody can look and see if there's a beam under it. Anybody can look and see if there's proper 6x6 posts going in the ground or concrete posts going into the ground that they actually is sitting on some solid structure. Okay.
Okay. So what's the big challenge if you have a deck and it's just sitting right on the grass? I can't see any beams underneath because there's no gap at all. It's just sitting right on the ground.
That's kind of why I get down underneath it and throw my camera under there and try taking as good a look as I can too. It's yeah, I don't expect all the agents to be able to get under there.
Okay.
But there's some that are 4 feet up in the air and could easily be seen. And you guys can take a look at them yourselves. That's easy enough to do. Okay.
Okay.
Look for beams, look for support posts.
All right.
Okay. And look for 6x6 posts, not 4x4 posts.
Okay. Why?
Standard,
What's the difference?
They're not 4x4s aren't strong enough. They don't meet our codes for one thing. I'm not here to talk about codes, but everything is supposed to be 6x6 posts.
Okay. So again, when you're having the big homecoming party, welcome to your new house.
Yeah.
You don't welcome everybody by falling through your deck.
That's right.
Okay. And when you're looking at challenges with the deck and how long it lasts, if it's sitting closer to the ground, could the deck last less time?
If it's too close to the ground, you'll get the moisture into it. Okay. Which will even pressure treated wood will rot out over time.
Okay.
We find that pressure treated wood does rot. I mean, it's good for a lot of years, but it does get wood rot in it. But yeah, if we find them right on the ground, chances are they got wood rot starting them right away. If they're up in the air and get airflow underneath them, sorry, talking about airflow, another thing I want to talk to you about. Sorry, sir, you can get me going.
That's okay. You can talk as much as you want, Roger. Guy, I feel like I just need a notepad to be taking notes on this. But please go ahead.
But when you're under a deck, when you're looking at the side of a deck, if you can't see under a deck and it's up in the air, it's because people close them in with skirting. And if they do skirting and they don't get airflow under them, that'll cause humidity to build underneath them and they'll get wood rotting quicker too.
Really? So even if it's up above the ground, if it's not like an open trellis is different than like solid skirting.
Yeah. And so many people put solid skirting in and I have to tell them, drill some holes in it, get some airflow underneath it. I know you're trying to keep the raccoons and cats or whatever from getting under there, but you still need airflow underneath the deck to actually vent it out and make sure it dries. Pouring rain, the water goes through there, that moisture is just going to build up under there and you're just going to cause wood rot over time. Okay. So
if I did have a deck that had that solid skirting, I don't necessarily have to rip it off. Like we're not talking you need to put holes like this.
No,
in the
just
skirt,
taking a drill with a 1-inch drill bit and drilling some holes in it, it just allows the airflow to flow through. And just make sure you got airflow on one side and on the other side so it actually passes underneath the book. So
it goes all the way through. It's not just doing a couple little holes on one side and not on any of the other sides. Well, and again, which can still prevent animals. I haven't yet seen a raccoon that can make it through a 1-inch drill bit hole, even if they are pretty wily.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else I should be thinking of in terms of railings, or are steps important on decks as well?
They're very important on decks. And quite often, I mean, I'm scary to say it, but I mean, I've seen people do the Gabion stone step systems. And if you're doing Gabion stones, one thing I look at is, okay, did they use the same type of Gabion stones? Because when you go to the quarries to buy your Gabion stones, you specifically ask for 7-inch stones or 8-inch stones or 6-inch stones, and you want to be as close as possible and you want to set them up so that every step is equal, okay? Or if you're building a set of wooden stairs, you don't want to see people climb upstairs and going 7 inch, 7 inch, 7 inch, and then all of a sudden there's the top step didn't quite meet the deck, it's only 3 inches. That's a big tripping hazard for anybody. I mean, you got some of my friends come over with a few beers in them. That's going to be someone landing on their nose. I can tell you right now. Okay. And you don't want that happening. You want your friends to all be safe. So hand railings or anything with steps over 4 steps. You want a hand railing, something to hang on to going upstairs. You try to make your steps all equal heights so they're even risers, so they're not tripping hazards. It's all stuff that we look at. A railing on a deck, if it's 24 inches off the ground, it should have a 36-inch high railing. Okay.
Really, only 2 feet off the ground. You have to have a railing?
Yeah, because any small kids falling 24 inches is very dangerous.
Right.
Okay. If you're in a balcony, which is 6 feet off the ground, it has to be a 42-inch railing.
So there's different height requirements depending on how far it is off the ground.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's just they want you to be that much safer because that's a lot farther. We want to make sure nobody goes over those railings. Okay?
Right. So lower to the ground is more, small children or all of that. It's a lower height that you can have. When you're significantly off the ground, you have a 2nd-story beautiful deck. You want to make sure the deck isn't hitting you at waist height. It's a little higher.
A little bit higher. You want to be a little safer. Yeah. And also when you look at the spindles, so between the spindles, the code is 4 inches, which is just about the width of most people's knuckles.
Okay.
You measure, you're about 4 inches wide. So, I mean, if you get in there and you can move your hand back and forth quite a bit, that's too big of an opening, and small kids can get through them.
Or get
to be
stuck,
careful.
or depending on how small they are.
Yeah. So 4 inches keeps most people safe. Okay.
Okay. So
That's
we're not
so-
punching decks, guys. I'm just putting this up there. You're just going in lightly with your hand. And is there too much wiggle room between those spindles?
Yeah.
Right. Don't punch them. You can't damage it yet. It's not yours just yet.
But yeah, just the wiggle room between your knuckles. I mean, 4 inches is just standard. We check them. Don't want too much space. We don't want people falling or kids falling through them.
Well, and especially if a deck wasn't maybe done by contractors, it was done by you and your friends on the weekend, it might not be perfectly to code, right?
True.
We only had so many spindles, so we're just going to space them apart, whatever makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever looks comfortable.
And would that also be a challenge with insurance?
It would be just because of the safety issue of it.
Right.
Especially when you get to balconies. Balconies are a big concern, especially with insurance agents. You just want to make sure that you have proper spacing between spindles, that you have to have proper heights. They're really sticky on balconies.
Which makes sense, right? If you're falling from the 2nd story of a house, anybody could, have a rather unfortunate end. It doesn't take much, right?
24 inches, yeah, you might hurt yourself, but you're not going to be seriously hurt.
Exactly, right?
When you get 6 feet up in the air, it's a big fall.
100%, right? We got to make sure we get that repeat business and referrals, right? We got to keep our clients safe and make sure that they're moving into a home that's safe. And especially if they have young kids, always keeping an eye out for safety concerns, because turn your back for a minute and they are off and running, right? You want to make sure they can't hurt themselves.
And it doesn't take much. You really got to watch for them.
Absolutely. Okay. So we're watching all of that. We looked at the eaves troughs. We're looking at the decks, checking out the spindles, and we're also looking again at grading. Not just in the front, not just at the side, we're looking at it at the back as well. So making sure it's always going away from the house.
Got to slope away from this house somehow, right? We see that even like the back corner, I got a downspout here. Water's not getting away from the house. So where does that downspout come down? How far away from the house does that actually downspout flow?
Okay.
If that downspout ends there, and then does it flow back into the house, or does it continue to flow out of the house? That's the main thing. So we really have to watch where they're going to.
Were you wondering where the downspout was?
We found the downspout, everyone.
The downspout. It's on here.
Okay.
Well, what we got to watch for. So in this situation, you can see the grading is low in there. Okay,
so we got some, I can always translate. So we've got some dipping where Roger's pointing out there. The grading is dipping a little bit. It's not flowing quite away from the house, and it's a little low there where he's putting on the downspout.
So the water's cooling here by this downspout.
So this is like the backyard pool you were talking about, except for it's near the house.
Yeah. Now
Okay.
someone tried to put a downspout on this one, but it's not running at a good enough slope. So if it's really raining hard, what you're going to find is it's going to overflow here because it's not running good enough. it's easy enough to talk to people. You can cut a downspout up here if you want. And put your downspout so it's up here. So it has a much better slope away from this house.
Okay, so what we're seeing here, guys, is even though we've got that giant long downspout, the angle is going back towards the house. As we know, water flows downhill, and if downhill is towards the house, it's just going to come out the bottom. So Roger's suggesting in a case like this, maybe cutting the downspout off a little higher, so then you're making sure you have that slope away from the house. It's not about the fact that we have this, 10-foot downspout. It's running uphill. So it's not actually going to help us here.
Sir, we get into situations too, like a lot of the subdivisions come with a concrete spill block, they're called.
Yes.
So the downspouts come down, hit the spill block, and it runs to that trench that's between the houses. But the biggest thing is, after a house has been 3 or 4 years old, the grading starts to settle down against the house. And I walk along, and so many people can see it. The concrete spill block is not sloping down now; it's sloping in towards the house.
Okay.
A simple fix: put a bit of dirt underneath it, get it sloped out. So when the water hits that down spill block, it'll flow away. It's so easy because now as soon as you start putting water against the house again, it's going to make the grading settle down in towards the house more. You're causing more and more problems. You're going to get more and more water against the house.
Okay. And you can also get, if you're not prepared to buy a 10-foot downspout, on our house, we got the little flexible hoses.
Yeah.
So we could put it up in the downspout and make sure wherever we were flowing it away from the foundation across the driveway, and it's not always a straight shot. You can pick that up at Canadian Tire Home Hardware.
And make sure it slopes downhill.
Slopes downhill.
So many of the flex hoses are put in, people go, oh yeah, I attached it, but it had to go up a hill and then go down. So it's half full of water half the time. So you really want to watch how you're setting them in, make sure everything's sloped away from the house. Okay.
It's always just sloping downhill. Yeah. And again, you get a rake up a little bit of dirt. You're not always bringing in an excavator if you're just dealing with a few feet around the house there.
Grading is important on a house.
Okay.
Sloping away from the house. Now there is a crack in this foundation.
Okay.
And I just want to talk to you about the crack in the foundation. Everybody gets excited because there's a crack in the foundation.
Oh my gosh, the sky is falling, right?
Honestly, every foundation, once the foundation has been poured, it has to settle and shrink a bit, okay? So when the concrete dries up, it gets shrinkage cracks. And usually they're in a corner of a window. So when you look at a corner of a window, when you're walking around the house for the first time, look at the corner of every window, basement window, and you'll lots of times you see a crack in those windows. Not a big issue. You can keep water out of those cracks by doing proper grading and proper downspouts.
Really? So
Yes.
you're not having to replace the foundation just because there's because when I see a crack in a foundation, oh my gosh, alarm bells are ringing, something's going on, right?
Hairline cracks are very common. They're pretty well in every poured foundation.
Really?
Yeah. It's
Okay.
very rare that they have water leak into them, as long as you can keep up with your grading and as long as you can keep up with the downspouts. When I talk about grading too, I usually talk about putting topsoil and grass on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a proper way to do grading. Some people think, well, okay, I got a low spot over here. I'll put some nice 3/4 inch stone and fill it in so it looks nice and level here. Well, you just cause a little pocket for that water to settle in. So,
Because it's just going to go underneath the
Yes.
stone.
so when I talk about grading,
Okay.
make sure it's done with topsoil, with grass on top of it, some way of making that water flow away.
And is the grass to stop with erosion, or like why can't I just use topsoil?
Yeah, because actually the grass it's got the root system which holds the topsoil all in place, and water loves to run across it.
So if we get one of those, like once a summer storms where it's just raining cats and dogs, all your topsoil just goes away.
I'd like to bring you out here on a rainy day and just show you what happens and where water flows. When we get into a house with good grading and stuff like that, I can take you out in the pouring rain and show you the water's completely running away from the house. It's so nice to see.
So Roger's volunteering, guys. I'm not coming out here in a pouring rainstorm, but we'll send out our videographer. We can come along with
There
you
you
with our rain ponchos.
I'll put our rain boots on and walk around the waterfalls and see where they flow.
Okay. All right. So we actually have our videographer. They're over at the crack on the other side of the house. So they're just pointing it out here. So this is the crack that you were talking about in the foundation, Roger. So even though this is to me, that's close to the ground.
Yeah.
That's not scary.
No, it's not scary because actually the grading's good along that side. So
Okay.
as long as you take a really good look at the grading along that side, make sure you got topsoil in there and the grass is growing on it. the water will run away from that crack. Okay.
Really?
So, yeah. If we don't, and we have a pocket of where the water's going to sit near that crack, that water's going to find its way into that foundation, and you're going to get water in your basement.
Okay.
And the worst part is you put water in the basement. Well, if you're finishing a basement, you do your framing, you do your insulation, then you turn around and put drywall there. All that water gets in there, holds moisture up against your drywall, then you get mold issues.
So if it's an unfinished basement, you might be able to see the challenges earlier, but if you finished it all beautifully, it might be a while till you notice that there's actually water coming inside.
Yeah. So the first thing you do is walk around the outside of a house.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people like to go in and see the decorating, but it's really important to walk around the outside of a house first, because you want to see where's your foundation cracks. Okay, now let's go downstairs and see that, okay, this basement's finished. Now, was the grading good outside? Where was the water running away from that crack? Or did I have a pocket area where the water was flowing down through and it's coming against that wall? Because even if it's nicely freshly painted or something inside this house, I can tell outside the water's coming up to that crack.
Okay.
Chances are
even
I
if
got
you can't
mold in
see
the
it,
wall.
there might be hidden mold. Now, if it's unfinished, is there anything I'm looking out for? Let's say it was a cinder block foundation. Is there any indication inside that there has been previous water damage in the
Definitely.
house?
If there's no insulation on the walls and that yet,
Yeah, just bare walls, not even painted.
there, okay, so the cinder block, you'll see what water gets into them, and it'll flow from one block to the next block to the next block, and you'll see a water line on the bottom of them blocks.
Really?
Yeah, usually 1 or 2 inches, there'll be a line of efflorescence lots of times. So it's
Okay.
like a white powder you're looking for. Efflorescence is bringing the salts out of the concrete. And it actually is, it will come through. Once the water starts dragging through the concrete, it brings the salts out of it, okay?
Okay, so even if it's maybe now graded away from the house, if I'm inside, it's an unfinished basement, and I'm seeing that white discoloration on the blocks, there was a water issue at some point.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if it's still cinder block and it's now you know the water's running away, that's where you have to go in and say, okay, am I getting the water now, or was it previous before they realized we had a grading issue going on?
Okay, and that's why walking outside is the
Yeah.
important part there. Now, let's say your client, they really want to fix the crack in the foundation. Yes, it's graded away, but they're not comfortable. Does this mean that we're digging up the side of the house?
It depends. So if it's a cinder block foundation wall, best way to do it is to dig up the outside wall and do a delta wrap sheet, which is a dimpled sheet, plastic sheet, easy to buy. You can dig them yourself. They're 10-foot. They come in 10-foot length sheets, and you can drop them in along the foundation. And the reason for the dimple is if I have a concrete wall, and then I got the dimples there, what that will do is if water gets in there, the water will run straight down through the dimple sheet to the weepers. Whereas if it doesn't have the dimples there, it hits a layer of clay halfway down. The water runs down, hits that layer of clay. Now it starts cooling, which pressurizes it to go in the house.
Okay, so that's something like I can dig on, just digging out the dirt from beside the foundation,
Yep.
moving it and putting in one of those dimple sheets, which
Yep.
Home Hardware, Canadian Tire,
They all
specialty
sell them.
stores?
Yep.
Okay.
Easy enough to do. If you have a poured concrete wall, which we just seen on the other side with a crack in it,
Yep.
there's professional guys that do a polyurethane injection into them. There's different injections they're starting to use now, but they'll drill holes into it, put a little tube on it, and actually fill it full of an injection, which actually seals that crack all the way up from top to bottom.
Okay, so that would be a more permanent solution. So cinder block, you can put in the sheets at the bottom. For something like this, you'd want to do the injection, but in this case, you're feeling comfortable that because the grading is moving away from the house, it's probably not an immediate issue that the homeowner would need to address as soon as the house closed.
Right. And I tell people too, I mean, even if you come in, you bought this house and you were finishing it off and you wanted to finish the basement, put the drywall in and stuff like that. Always, once a year, walk around your foundation wall, make sure that water's running away from any signs of any cracks, anything near your house.
Right.
That's how important it is, because if you were to come in here and think, okay, well, it's been solved, the grading's done now. Now I finished my basement. 3 years later, I got mold starting my basement. Why? Because I didn't come back out and make sure that grading was running away again.
Mhm.
Just regular maintenance, keep up with your grading on a house, make sure it's still running away from the house, okay?
Well, and that walk around, because the grading might be good when you buy it, and then your eaves troughs are full of leaves from that beautiful maple tree in your backyard.
Yeah,
Now it's run down there and it's eroded all that grading.
absolutely right.
Okay. All right. So always doing kind of that once yearly walk around
Yeah, just to make sure you check your eave troughs, make sure the water's flowing, make sure the downspouts are getting the water away, make sure your grading's getting the water away. Yeah, if you own a house, put on a raincoat and walk around the rain
Yes.
once a year. Try it.
Or
Take an umbrella.
send your husband out to walk around in the rain, which is what I do. But have somebody walk around
Take a
and
walk
just
in
check
the rain,
that.
or shortly after rain, just see where the water's going. Is it pooling up against the house? You want to take care of it. Okay.
So even if it's not necessarily visible to the naked eye with the grading, after a really big rainstorm, you're going to see where the water naturally wants to go. Okay, that makes sense.
Mhm.
All right. And the one thing that I will also mention, guys, is when you have an inspector like Roger, especially Roger, coming through your property, you get a handy little dandy binder when you're done. So we have owned our house for 4 years. Anytime we're having challenges, anytime we're doing something on the house, I know exactly where that binder is. I've pulled it out. I've handed it to contractors when they are fixing things as a reference. You had a professional look at the house, not somebody who just, has experience. This is Roger with 27 years experience, and you can give it to your contractors who also have the experience to understand what needs to happen.
And if you have any questions a year or two down the road, doesn't matter. If you have a contractor doing something and you want to ask me if he's doing it right, some guys know what they're doing, some guys don't. I'm going to tell you. Are they doing it the good way for you or not? Feel free to give me a shout.
Absolutely. And again, guys, Roger loves answering questions. I know I've bothered him as well. And that's the advantage of not just somebody that you Googled. You're going with a trusted inspection company. We always recommend Roger to all of our clients because of that. It's not just on the sale, it's afterwards. And I'm going to pull in one of our agents who is unlucky enough to be here that I can drag him in. So Jake Jordan is one of the amazing agents on our team, and you've worked with Roger on many an inspection. Right?
I have. He's passed many and he's failed many for me. So that's one thing I love about this guy is that he's neutral. I've worked with you for a long time, probably about 6 years now. You failed quite a few. We've had quite a few interesting experiences together. We've
Not
had
that I failed them.
Exactly. The house failed itself. Roger
The house failed it.
Exactly.
I just explained and they weren't willing to purchase and repair
exactly.
all the repairs.
Which is a good thing because
you want to know what you're buying.
What you're saying about house and home.
So what my statement on my website is, make sure you get to know the house before you make it your home.
Exactly. So I mean, when we're going out to these showings, and when we go to the home inspection with you, we're making sure that it's the house they want to call their home and they want to firm up on. So, I mean, the one thing I wanted to share is I recently had an experience. Roger, he loves Florida. This guy goes on vacation very seldomly, but when he does, we have to rely on some other people. And I had an inspection go through and unfortunately had to use someone else. Roger wasn't available. And there was a little issue that came up, and Roger's very good at normalizing the issues that should be normalized. It's like little things like the deck that we talked about, little things you might be a weekend fix. You might not want to walk away from a deal for that reason. You might be able to make something work. So that's one thing I love about this guy is he will talk the clients as well as myself through all the issues with the house. Make sure you're aware of them. Make sure you understand the fixes that need to be done. And if it is a normal issue, he'll tell you how to fix them. So that's what I love about this guy. It's why I continue to use them. And that's kind of my spiel on him.
So it's not always, again, you're going to find issues on pretty much any house.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always mean the sky is falling, that it's a poor purchase, that you definitely shouldn't buy it. I'm an old renovated cottage in Keswick, and there was more than a few issues on our inspection report. And we went through what the options were to fix it. We didn't have to tear the house down. What could we do over the next several years that Roger guided us through? And it was worth it for us. And as Jake said, if it's not worth it, Roger is not going to sugarcoat it. He is going to normalize things. But if there are major challenges with a home, health and safety issues, you're going to know about it. And it doesn't, even though we've worked together for many years, if one of our listings wasn't safe for a family, Roger's going to tell us that and is going to tell the buyer client that. It's all about making sure it's safe for the next people moving in.
Nice being honest with everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
And we love you for being honest, because then you know what you're getting into.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to see if we have any questions here, guys. Throw them into the Q&A. I feel like I could just talk with Roger all the time. We were at an inspection last week, and I think I threw 100 questions your way.
They're worth having lots of times.
Okay, so I'm not really seeing any coming in here, guys. I feel like we have a lot of people on that have used Roger. We always highly recommend him. So again, after this training, we will be blasting out his contact information. We love using Roger and we want to share his knowledge with everybody else. Again, as Jake mentioned, the quality of the inspector you use can make or break a deal and can make or break the client experience.
What areas does Roger work?
Love that. Where can we get you to go,
works everywhere,
Roger?
guys. Roger was in Port Severn yesterday. He's been to Hamilton quite a few times. I've been to Ottawa because I specialize in log homes and I've gone all the way to Ottawa for log homes. Ottawa.
So what's the average cost of an inspection?
I usually charge $450 per house on an average house. You know, if I'm traveling, I usually have to add a little bit of a bonus for traveling time. And if I got an apartment, I have to add extra, running 2 or 3 furnaces in houses, 2 or 3 electrical panels. It's always extra work that I have to do, so I have to add bonuses on that. Okay.
So what if there was multiple offers on a property? What would you recommend if we're like the day before and we know there's an offer date tomorrow, Roger?
Oh, I love that. So this was, if we're in multiple offers, oh my gosh, there's all these other offers and offer date is tomorrow. What do we do, Roger?
I really want to do this because I hate to see multiple offers. Bidding wars are scary for anybody buying a house. So I will try to do a 1-hour walkthrough to pick up most of this stuff. There's no guarantee I'm picking up everything. I'm not getting full coverage. I don't want people coming back to me complaining, but I will find your major stuff on a house. I'm not going to nitpick about your doors banging the walls. I'm not going to nitpick about this light not working. I am going to look at your major stuff, know enough if you should be bidding on a house, something like this, because we've gotten into some houses where I've done the walkthrough, 1-hour walkthrough, and found you can't see some of the shingles from the roof, from the front driveway. But when I get up on the roof and I see shingles missing, and you know what, these shingles have got maybe a year left in their life cycle, that's making a big difference on what you're offering on this house. You know, I can get in and look at the furnace and go, well, this furnace is 20 years old. It's almost time to replace it. You know, there's just different things. I can go and try to look at the framing system, make sure I don't got any bowed walls, make sure everything's properly supported in the house. You know, those are the most important things to me. To look at your furnace, your shingles, look at the insulation in the attic, make sure I don't got a ton of mold growing up there or anything like that. It's just, in an hour, I can pick a lot of stuff out of a house.
And Sarah, can we just go ahead and just take an inspector into any house, or is there something we would have to do in that situation?
Oh, that's a great point as well. So when you're bringing an inspector into a house, you want to let the listing agent know you're doing that. Roger is looking at certain things. He is going up in the attic. He might be opening the electrical panel. What we found, and especially when things were really hot last year and there was a lot of multiple offers, if you're open with the listing agent, generally they don't mind. Like Roger said, a pre-inspection is an hour, a full inspection is 3 hours. So getting in for an hour ahead of time, the listing agent also knows that you're likely coming in with a stronger offer because your buyer clients feel more comfortable, and it also makes for a smoother closing. So just make sure if you were booking a pre-inspection, if Roger is walking through a home, you are letting the agent know that it's not just a showing, you are bringing in an inspector to do a pre-inspection. And in my experience, everybody's happy to work with us on that because, again, happy clients win-win for both sides means smooth closings for everybody, right?
And what would we do, just an off sidebar conversation, what would we do if there was septic and well?
Oh, and septic and well, that is a great point as well. So Roger, I mean, the way I'm talking, Roger is all seeing, all knowing, and we bring in experts for every field. So again, I was out last week with Roger on an amazing property. It was a septic and well. We brought in our septic and well inspector. So when you're talking to your real estate agent, they're going to have trusted people they work with that have the same skills that Roger do.
Yeah.
Roger does, but looking at septic and wells, because again, these are big ticket items. If you're replacing a roof, that's a lot of money. If you're replacing a septic or you're drilling a new well, that's big money. You're 60, 70,000, even more if you have to replace both of those systems fully. So again, happy clients, happy closings, repeat and referral business because you have looked after them. They are trusting us to protect them from what they don't know. And it's our expertise to guide them through the purchase to keep them safe, right?
Yep, you want to know what you're buying.
Exactly, right? Know the house before you make it a home, guys. We're stealing that, Roger. That's the best phrase that I've ever heard here. So again, thank you to everybody for joining. We will be blasting out Roger's contact information because again, raising the bar of knowledge for all of us. Thank you so much to everybody joining. If you have any other questions, shoot them over. I'm always happy to do extra conversations with Roger here, and we'll have a couple extra reels. So watch social media for some bonus content from this webinar. Thank you, everybody. Have an amazing rest of your day, and we will see you all on our August training.
Thank you.